Hi, I am Sophia. Welcome to True Payback, where story hits different. Hit subscribe. Let's dive in.
The Sunday brunch was Jennifer's idea. Family meeting, she'd called it, though we all knew what that meant. Jennifer wanted an audience while she explained how things were going to work. She'd chosen Bistro Laurent, the kind of place where reservations required 6 weeks' notice and the waiters spoke French whether you understood it or not. I arrived in my 7-year-old Honda Accord, parking it between a Tesla and a Mercedes SUV in the restaurant's lot. The valet gave my car a look that suggested I'd made a wrong turn somewhere. Inside, Jennifer had claimed the corner table, the one with the best lighting and a view of the entire dining room. She was wearing Chanel, her signature perfume, creating a cloud of expensive floral notes around her. Mom and Dad flanked her like supporting actors, already nodding along to whatever narrative she'd prepared. "Grace," Jennifer said as I approached, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You made it. We weren't sure you'd find parking." "The valet was very helpful," I said, sliding into the only remaining chair, the one with its back to the room naturally. "I'm sure he was," she said, glancing at her Cartier watch. "Well, let's order quickly. I have a meeting with my legal team at 3. The waiter appeared, and Jennifer ordered for the table without asking what anyone else wanted. Champagne oysters, the chef's tasting menu. $800 in food for a conversation that could have happened over a phone call. "So," Jennifer began once the champagne arrived, "I wanted us all together to discuss the situation with Aunt Marian's estate." Aunt Marian had died 6 weeks earlier, leaving behind a complicated will and a $3 million estate that included property in Seattle, investments in various companies, and a vintage car collection worth $500,000 on its own. "The situation," I repeated carefully. "Yes. The probate hearing is scheduled for Tuesday, and I think it's important we present a united family front." Jennifer sipped her champagne. "My attorneys have reviewed the will extensively, and they believe we have strong grounds to contest several provisions." "Contest," I said. "Aunt Marian's clearly written wishes." "Aunt Marian was elderly and confused," Jennifer said smoothly. "The will was written when she was already experiencing cognitive decline. My legal team represents Fortune 500 companies. Davidson & Chin is one of the most prestigious firms in the Pacific Northwest. They know how to handle these matters properly." Dad nodded. "Jennifer's lawyers are top-tier, Grace. They've won cases against major corporations. This estate matter will be straightforward for them." "I'm sure it will be," I said quietly. "The thing is," Jennifer continued, leaning forward with that particular expression she used when delivering bad news disguised as helpful advice, "we need to think about optics. How things look to Judge Morrison and the court." "Optics," I repeated. "Yes. Davidson & Chin has a reputation to maintain. Their clients are senators, tech executives, international businesspeople. The courtroom on Tuesday will reflect that standard." She paused delicately. "Which is why we think it's best if you don't attend." The table went silent. Mom studied her champagne glass. Dad suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. "You don't want me at the hearing," I said. "It's not that we don't want you there," Jennifer said quickly. "It's just that you showing up in your Honda wearing—" She gestured vaguely at my simple blouse and slacks. "Well, it would just not fit the image we're trying to project. We need to look like a family of substance, of sophistication. My attorneys have worked very hard to position us as the responsible parties who should manage Aunt Marian's affairs." "And I don't look responsible," I said flatly. "You look like what you are," Jennifer said, her smile sharpening. "The poor relative. And that's fine, Grace. Not everyone can be successful. But Tuesday is important, and having you there would just complicate things." Mom finally spoke up. "Jennifer's right, honey. This is a big legal matter. Let her handle it with her expert team. You don't really understand these complicated financial issues anyway. Besides," Dad added, "you'd just be sitting there out of place while the real professionals do their work. Why put yourself through that embarrassment?" I took a sip of the champagne I hadn't wanted. "What provisions are you contesting exactly?" Jennifer's eyes lit up. She'd been waiting for this question. "Well, the will leaves you 40% of the liquid assets, which is absurdly disproportionate given your contributions to Aunt Marian's life. My attorneys believe we can prove that allocation was made during a period of diminished capacity." 40%, I said. "Of $3 million. Which you absolutely don't need and wouldn't know how to manage properly, Jennifer said. Our proposal is much more reasonable. I get 70% as the primary heir, mom and dad split 20% and you receive 10%. A nice little windfall for you. More than enough for someone in your position. Someone in my position. The poor relative. The family disappointment who drove a Honda and didn't understand complicated financial issues. And if I disagree with this arrangement? I asked. Jennifer laughed. That particular crystalline laugh she'd perfected for charity galas. Grace, sweetie, you can't afford to disagree. Do you have any idea what it costs to hire attorneys capable of fighting Davidson and Chin? My legal team would bury you in motions and depositions. You'd spend everything you have just to lose in the end. She's trying to protect you, Mom added. Taking 10% now is better than ending up with nothing after legal fees. The oysters arrived. Jennifer made a show of demonstrating the proper way to eat them, as if none of us had ever seen shellfish before. I just want to be clear, I said slowly. You want me to skip the hearing, accept a quarter of what Aunt Marion left me, and pretend I'm grateful for it? Exactly. Jennifer beamed. I knew you'd understand once we explained it properly. This way everyone wins. I get to manage the estate properly, Mom and Dad get a nice retirement boost, and you get more money than you'd ever see otherwise. Plus, you avoid the humiliation of sitting in that courtroom looking like you. Everyone laughed. Even the waiter, passing by with more champagne, smiled indulgently. I pulled out my phone. Excuse me for just a moment. I need to send a quick email. Can't it wait? Jennifer asked, annoyed. We're having a family discussion. It's urgent, I said. Work matter. I opened my email and found the contact I needed. Michael Torres, senior partner at Blackstone Capital Management. I typed quickly. Michael, please execute immediate withdrawal of all capital from Davidson and Chin Law Firm. Authorization code, Cascade 7734. Effective immediately. Complete funding termination under Section 9.2 of Partnership Agreement. Confirm receipt. I hit send and set my phone face down on the table. Sorry. Where were we? We were discussing your agreement to our very generous proposal, Jennifer said. I'll have my attorneys draw up the paperwork this afternoon. You can sign it tomorrow and Tuesday's hearing will be just a formality. Your attorneys at Davidson and Chin, I said. The best in the business, she confirmed proudly. Robert Davidson himself is handling our case. He usually only takes clients worth at least $50 million, but he's making an exception because of the family connection. How nice of him, I said. My phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen. Withdrawal initiated. Davidson will receive notice within the hour. $4.7 million principal plus accrued returns equals $5.1 million total extraction. Confirmed timeline, immediate. I typed back, confirmed. Thank you. Jennifer was still talking, explaining how the estate would be divided, how she'd invest Aunt Marion's money properly, how grateful I should be that she was looking out for the family's interests. I mean, honestly, Grace, what would you even do with that much money? She asked. You'd probably just put it in a savings account earning nothing. I have investment advisors, wealth managers, connections to opportunities you can't even imagine. This way the money stays in capable hands. Capable hands, I repeated. Yes. Professional hands. People who understand finance, law, complex transactions. Not, she stopped herself just barely, but we all knew what she'd been about to say. Not people like you. My phone rang. Unknown number with a 206 area code. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Same number. You should probably turn that off, Jennifer said, irritated. It's incredibly rude to have your phone ringing during brunch. It might be important, I said, standing. Excuse me. I walked to the restaurant's lobby and answered. Yes. Ms. Anderson? This is Robert Davidson from Davidson and Chin Law. His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. I apologize for calling on a Sunday, but we've received some very concerning correspondence from Blackstone Capital Management, and I was hoping we could discuss it before. Before what, Mr. Davidson? Before any irreversible actions are taken. Ms. Anderson, the notice claims you're withdrawing $4.7 million in investment capital from our firm. I'm certain this is some kind of clerical error. It's not an error, I said calmly. I'm pulling my complete funding from Davidson and Chin, effective immediately. Silence. Then, may I ask why? Our partnership has been extremely profitable. Your returns have exceeded 18% annually. If there's some concern we can address. You're representing my sister Jennifer in litigation against me, Mr. Davidson. That's a fairly significant conflict of interest, wouldn't you say? More silence. I could almost hear the mental calculations, the panic setting in. I wasn't aware that you were the opposing party in the Marion Fletcher estate matter, he said finally. The case file lists Sarah G. Anderson as the primary beneficiary. Sarah Grace Anderson. I go by Grace. But yes, that's me. The poor relative, who doesn't fit your firm's image. The one my sister doesn't want at Tuesday's hearing because I drive a Honda. Miss Anderson, if I'd known. You'd have what? Turned down a paying client? Somehow I doubt it. Jennifer's probably paying you quite well to contest a will that's perfectly clear and legal. I need to review this situation with my partners. You need to return my capital within the timeline specified in our partnership agreement. I corrected. 10 business days for full withdrawal. I expect compliance. Ms. Anderson, please. Our firm has significant obligations. We've used that capital to expand our offices, hire new associates, finance our operations. An immediate withdrawal would be catastrophic. That sounds like a challenging situation, I said. I'm sure you'll work it out. After all, you represent Fortune 500 companies. You're the best in the business. Surely you can handle a simple capital withdrawal. If this is about the estate case, we can recuse ourselves immediately. It's too late for that, Mr. Davidson. You've already filed motions, made arguments, advised my sister how to minimize my inheritance. The conflict exists. My investment ends. That's business. I hung up before he could respond. When I returned to the table, Jennifer was in the middle of explaining her vision for Aunt Marion's vintage car collection. We'll sell them at auction, of course. Probably get $600,000 if we handle it properly. That money can be invested in. Grace, are you all right? You look strange. I'm fine, I said, sitting down. Just a work call. On Sunday. She laughed. What kind of work calls you on Sunday? Let me guess. Your boss at the nonprofit wants you to come in early tomorrow. I didn't work at a nonprofit. I'd never worked at a nonprofit. But I'd stopped correcting Jennifer's assumptions about my life about 5 years ago, when I realized she wasn't actually interested in the truth. Something like that, I said. Well, anyway, as I was saying, the car collection alone will bring in substantial returns. And the Seattle property, we can flip that for at least $800,000. The investments will take more time to liquidate, but my team has it all mapped out. By this time next year, I'll have transformed Aunt Marion's scattered assets into a properly managed portfolio. Your team, I said. Davidson and Chen's Wealth Management Division. They're truly exceptional. Robert Davidson personally oversees accounts over $10 million. He's taking a special interest in our case. My phone vibrated again. Text message from Michael Torres. Davidson called me directly. Extremely agitated. Requested emergency meeting. I declined. He's threatening legal action to delay withdrawal. Want me to crush this? I typed back, yes. Use all available leverage. No delays, no negotiations. Jennifer's phone rang. She glanced at it, frowned, and silenced it. That's odd. Robert usually doesn't call on weekends unless it's urgent. Maybe you should answer it, I suggested. Kim, wait. We're having family time. She smiled at me. Now about Tuesday. You're comfortable not attending, right? We don't want any awkwardness in the courtroom. What kind of awkwardness? I asked. Well, questions about why you're there. Why you think you deserve 40% when you barely saw Aunt Marion the last few years. Why you're challenging our family's unified position. She leaned forward conspiratorially. Between us, Robert thinks the judge will be sympathetic to our argument. Especially when we present evidence of your limited financial literacy and Aunt Marion's declining mental state. Evidence of my limited financial literacy, I repeated. Nothing personal, Grace. Just facts. You work for a nonprofit, you drive a Honda, you live in that tiny apartment in Fremont. It's clear you don't understand money management. Giving you 40% would be irresponsible. The judge will see that. Her phone rang again. This time she looked genuinely annoyed. "This is getting ridiculous." She answered. "Robert, this really isn't a good time." I watched her face change. Watched confusion become concern become something close to panic. "What do you mean, conflict of interest?" "We vetted everything." She listened, her face growing paler. "I, sister? Grace. That's impossible. She doesn't have." More listening. "I don't understand. How could she possibly?" She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in probably 5 years. "I'll call you back," she said quietly, ending the call. The table had gone silent. Mom and Dad were looking between us, confused. "Grace," Jennifer said carefully, "Robert just told me that his firm's primary investor is withdrawing $4.7 million in capital. Apparently there's a conflict of interest because this investor is involved in our estate case." "That's unfortunate," I said, taking a bite of the appetizer I hadn't ordered. "He said the investor is someone named Cascade Private Holdings." "Interesting name," I said. "Grace." Her voice had an edge now. "Do you know anything about this?" "Why would I know anything about a private equity firm's investment decisions?" "Because Robert seems to think you're connected to this somehow. He was asking questions about you. About your finances. About..." She stopped, something clicking into place behind her eyes. "You're not actually poor, are you?" Mom sat forward. "What are you talking about?" "Grace works for a nonprofit. She drives a Honda." "I drive a Honda because I like Hondas," I said calmly. "They're reliable, efficient, and don't attract attention. Just like I prefer my apartment in Fremont because it's close to good coffee shops and has a view of the canal. And I've never worked for a nonprofit in my life, though I donate to several." "Then what do you do?" Dad asked. "I run Cascade Private Holdings." "Well, I am Cascade Private Holdings. It's my investment firm. I manage a portfolio of approximately $87 million across various sectors, including strategic investments in law firms, tech companies, and commercial real estate." Jennifer's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the expensive tile floor. The entire restaurant turned to look. "That's impossible," she whispered. "It's really not. I built a supply chain consulting company 8 years ago, sold it for $28 million and invested the proceeds carefully. Davidson and Chin was one of those investments. They needed capital to expand their corporate division. I provided $4.7 million 18 months ago." "You have $87 million, Mom said faintly. "Approximately. The portfolio fluctuates with market conditions. Some quarters it's higher." "And you let us think you were poor," Jennifer said, her voice hardening. "You let us mock you, dismiss you, treat you like you were nothing." "You did that on your own," I corrected. "I never said I was poor. You never asked about my life. You assumed I was struggling because I didn't perform wealth the way you do. Because I didn't drive the right car or wear the right labels or join the right clubs. You lied to us," Dad accused. "I didn't lie. I just didn't correct your incorrect assumptions. There's a difference." Jennifer's phone rang again. She answered it shakily. "Yes, Robert." She listened, her face going from pale to gray. "I understand. Yes. Well, yes. We'll discuss this tomorrow." She ended the call and looked at me with something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Fear. "Robert says the capital withdrawal will force them to close their corporate division. They'll have to lay off 12 associates. They can't take our case forward. They're overwhelmed with restructuring. He's recommending we find new counsel immediately, but the hearing is in 2 days." Her voice cracked. "Grace, why would you do this?" "You told me I'd look desperate in that courtroom," I said quietly. "You said my presence would ruin your image. You tried to steal half of what Aunt Marion left me because you thought I was too poor and stupid to fight back. We were protecting the family. You were protecting yourselves. From having to split Aunt Marion's estate fairly. From having to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, she loved me as much as she loved you." "She couldn't have," Jennifer whispered. "You barely visited her." "I visited her every Tuesday for 3 years," I said. "We had dinner together. We talked about books and politics and her memories of growing up during the Depression. I took her to doctor appointments and helped her organize her finances. I was there, Jennifer. You were busy with your important life, your important friends, your important career. You showed up on holidays with expensive gifts and left after 2 hours." Mom was crying now. "We didn't know. You didn't ask. You never ask. You just assume. What do we do now? Dad asked helplessly. Tuesday's hearing. We'll go forward exactly as Aunt Marian planned, I said. I have my own attorney. A very good one who works for considerably less than Davidson and Chin but is actually competent at estate law. We'll present Aunt Marian's will, which is ironclad. We'll present evidence of her sound mind, including videos she recorded specifically anticipating that someone might contest her wishes. And the court will honor what she wanted. Which is? Jennifer asked, though she clearly already knew. 40% to me as specified. 30% to you. 30% to Mom and Dad to split. Exactly what she wrote. What you would have gotten if you hadn't tried to cheat me out of my share. We wouldn't have cheated you, Jennifer protested weakly. You were going to give me 10% of what's mine. You call that something other than cheating? Silence fell over the table. Around us, other diners had returned to their meals, but I could feel the occasional glance, the curiosity about what had caused that spectacular champagne glass crash. I don't understand, Mom said finally. Why keep it secret? Why not tell us you were successful? Because the moment I told you, everything would change. You'd want investments, loans, business opportunities. You'd introduce me to your friends as Grace, our daughter who's done so well for herself, instead of Grace, bless her heart, she tries. You'd want something from me instead of just wanting me. That's not fair, Dad said. Isn't it? When's the last time any of you asked about my life without it being a setup for asking me for something? They couldn't answer. Because they couldn't remember. Because it had never happened. Aunt Marian knew, I continued. She's the only one I told. She asked about my work, actually listened to my answers, celebrated my successes. That's why she left me what she did. Not because I deserved it more, but because she knew I'd honor her memory properly. That I'd protect what she'd built. Jennifer's phone was ringing constantly now. She silenced it completely, staring at her untouched plate. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now you find a new attorney in the next 48 hours and try to explain to them why your previous counsel dropped your case 2 days before the hearing. Or you accept Aunt Marian's will as written and we move forward without litigation. Your choice. If we contest it, my attorney will bury you in motions and depositions. We'll subpoena records showing how rarely you visited Aunt Marian, how I was the one managing her care, how she was completely competent when she wrote her will. We'll present evidence that you tried to pressure her into changing it 6 months before she died. We'll make you look exactly like what you are, greedy relatives trying to steal from someone who was generous enough to leave you anything at all. You'd do that, Jennifer said. It wasn't a question. To protect Aunt Marian's wishes? Absolutely. Mom pushed her untouched food away. We've made a terrible mistake. Several, I agreed. But the biggest one was assuming I'd just accept being treated like I didn't matter. That I'd smile and nod while you stole from me because you thought I was too poor to fight back. We're sorry, Dad said. Truly. We didn't understand. You didn't want to understand. There's a difference. I stood up, leaving my napkin on the table. I need to go. I have actual work to do today. You can split the check. I'm sure between the 3 of you, you can cover $800 for a meal none of us ate. Grace, wait, Jennifer called as I headed for the door. Tuesday. The hearing. What should we do? I turned back. Accept the will as written. Sign the consent forms. Let Aunt Marian's final wishes be honored. Or don't, and watch me prove in open court that you tried to steal from a dead woman who loved you. Your choice. You have until Monday at 5 p.m. to decide. I walked out of Bistro Laurent, past the valets and the luxury cars, and climbed into my reliable Honda Accord. My phone was already ringing. Michael Torres, probably with updates on the Davidson and Chin situation. I answered as I pulled out of the parking lot. Michael. Talk to me. Davidson is in full panic mode. They're offering concessions, delayed withdrawal timelines, increased returns, anything to keep the capital in place. Want me to negotiate? No. Full withdrawal on the original timeline. They made their choice when they took Jennifer's case. Understood. For what it's worth, you're causing quite a disruption in the legal community. Word is spreading fast. Other firms are going to be very careful about who they're representing before they take your money. Good. That's exactly what I want. I drove home to my tiny apartment in Fremont, The one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Union, the one I'd paid cash for 3 years ago, the one worth $2.1 million that my family had never bothered to visit. Inside, I opened my laptop and pulled up the file I'd been preparing for weeks. Evidence for Tuesday's hearing. Videos of Aunt Marian explaining her choices. Medical records proving her competence. Financial documents showing the care I'd provided. Testimony from her doctors, her attorney, her accountant. Everything I needed to honor her wishes and protect what she'd left me. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "We'll accept the will as written. I'm sorry, Grace. For everything." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "See you Tuesday." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was just acknowledgement that the battle was over before it really began. Because that's what happened when people underestimated you. When they assumed you were weak because you didn't perform strength their way. When they thought poverty meant you were powerless. They learned eventually. Usually too late. I closed my laptop and looked out at the city lights reflecting on the water. Somewhere out there, Robert Davidson was trying to explain to his partners how they'd lost their biggest investor. Jennifer was probably crying into her expensive champagne. Mom and Dad were reconsidering every assumption they'd made about their younger daughter. And I was here in my tiny apartment protecting what mattered. Exactly as Aunt Marian had trusted me to do. Tuesday's hearing would be a formality now. The will would be honored. The estate would be distributed fairly. And maybe, my family would start asking questions instead of making assumptions. But probably not. Some people never learned. I poured myself a glass of wine. A 2015 Bordeaux from Aunt Marian's collection, one she'd left specifically for me with a note that said, "Drink this when you win." I raised the glass to the city lights. "I won, Aunt Marian," I said quietly. "Just like you knew I would." The wine was perfect,